Gurubhyo Namah, Pitrubhyo Namah, Gurubhyo Namah, Sabhaye Namah, Sabhavakya Namah. Very good morning to all of you. Thank you so much, Professor Raju Garu. This kind of clarity really helps. So thank you so much for bringing that clarity, because that is many a times lost in the emotional exuberance that we have when we talk about IKS. So in terms of the IKS division, the mandate of the IKS division and things like that, essentially it was to develop a interdisciplinary research program, but we have far expanded that, and I will talk about the roadmap of what is it that we are trying to do in the IKS division. So, and this is a plan for next 25, 30 years. That's what we have planned. And the idea is, so we keep talking about Macaulay's education system and all that from 1835. And as a result of that, the Indian knowledge systems traditions have become dormant. So most of the Indian knowledge systems essentially is in libraries. We want to bring it to laboratories. What does that really mean? What that means is, it is not enough for us to talk about a Shushruta, Charaka or Aryabhatta, that they existed. It is important for us to have a Abhinava Charaka, Abhinava Aryabhatta, and more people we should be creating new Aryabhattas and Vagbhattas in the future, and Bharata Munis as we go in the future. That is essentially what we are thinking about. That is only when we can say that this IKS is a living tradition and things like that. So whenever we talk about any IKS projects, we think of three things. The first thing is that we have this continuous parampara that is being flowing. Second thing is Bharatiya Jnana parampara. Essentially it brings a unique drishti, unique perspective that is very valuable to solve the contemporary and emerging issues. And the third thing is, it has laukika prayojana, that is essentially something that is useful for now. Because if you look at all four purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, two of them are very laukika, artha and kama are very laukika. So 50% of that we are basically focusing on that. And in terms of the roadmap, what is it that we want to, now we know the problem. What is the problem? The problem is IKS is currently in libraries. How do we bring it to the laboratories? So when you think about it, we had a very vibrant system of education which supported all the education from the primary and system higher. There were higher education institutions, there were research institutions. All those things were again supported by society. There was knowledge creation happening, and we need to regenerate that in the IKS domain. For that, it is important, if I have to give you that example from engineering, it is called priming the pump. Those of you who have the old pumps, you need to put some water into it before you can start. That is essentially what we are thinking of our role as at the national level. What is it that we want to do? There is this pump that is already existing. That is essentially our Bharati Jnana in terms of existing in the libraries. We need to restart that. How do we do that? We start off at the very basic level in the school education. So we need to bring IKS into the school curriculum, not as a separate subject, but something that is integral part of the entire curriculum. So for example, if we are going to teach the children that food has protein, carbohydrates, which is essentially a allopathic or a reductionist perspective, we also need to teach them that the Ayurvedic perspective of how a food can be Vata Janaka, Pitta Janaka or Kafanashaka and things like that, from that perspective. So we need to bring in the Bharatiya Chikitsa Padhati and Arogya Samskriti into that curriculum at that point. We also need to teach them how we do the mathematics from an Indian perspective, in addition to the Eulerian perspective that we currently teach. And we want to bring them that there are these, again, different rasayanas, basically Shastra, all those essentially without compromising the rigor at any point. So this is something that we want to bring in at the school level, so that the child is primed to receive more advanced knowledge when he or she goes to the undergraduate education and the higher education. So then in the next step, we need to introduce more courses, and these are, which will not just be broad-based courses, but also discipline-specific courses that the children can take, so that they develop Panditya in their discipline as related to IKS, so that they can blend the modern education, contemporary knowledge systems with the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara, so that we can solve problems that are not solvable by either of them. So the point, and then we need to go into then moving up a higher little bit into the research domain, where we are creating new knowledge. Until this point, we were essentially transformation of, there was transfer of information. We were also creating that capability at the undergraduate and postgraduate level. Now when we talk about research, we need to create new knowledge, and for that it is important that we support the researchers to do these kind of interdisciplinary projects. And then when we go into supporting the individual researchers, so that is essentially again to uh, for this knowledge creation. Finally, getting into the institutional level, we need to support capacity building at the institutional level also. This is where, again, we need to support institutions to create these centers where they can essentially become like this Vatavruksha or the banyan tree, where all these people who are working in IKS and contemporary knowledge systems can converge and bring out multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches. And so this is essentially about the academic curricula, so that each of these places, there will be people who will be dropping out at the undergrad level and then getting into the industry and working in the society maybe they'll be starting their own startups, or they'll be going to an industry, but they will be grounded in the Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. That is something that we may want to do. And to support all these efforts, we need to have resource bases, knowledge resources that are available to any of these stakeholders. So these are some of the things that we probably want to do. And to do that, essentially, we need to create curriculum at the school level, create courses at the higher education level, support research projects to the researchers, and offer fellowships to researchers who want to get into the research, and offer support to the institutions so that they can build the institutional capacity. So essentially, that is that priming of the pump, pouring that water to restart this. At the same time, it is going to be very important for the society to see the value. Because ultimately, all of these things have to be supported by the society. Government can only do this to a limited extent. So, and for that, we need to create awareness in the people. So there needs to be a lot of outreach activities. These are some of the things that we are thinking from an IKS perspective. In terms of what is measurable, and essentially if we want to look at it I will combine what is measurable and indicate achievables in up to 10 years and 10 to 30 years, and how to do it in one go. And the idea would be, in terms of agencies like NCRT, SCRTs, and the school educational bodies, we need to be working with them. They are the stakeholders. For them, their role will be to facilitate course development, curriculum development at the school level, and train the teachers. Very, very important that NCRT, SCRTs, they should be focusing on teacher training. And do this in Matrubhashas. This is another very, very important component. So this is something that we need to be thinking about very seriously, and this is what these agencies can do. And and then for the teachers, they should be teaching this content, getting trained, and then teaching this content to the students at the school level. And what does that really mean? That means they should be dedicating at least 10% of their subject time to talking about subjects that are basically topics related to the Indian knowledge systems. In any subject, whether we talk about English, Hindi, mathematics, physics, or any subjects, they need to be talking about at least 10% in the next 10 years. And in the long term, 10 to 30 years, that should go up to 30-40%. That is when we can have an Indian brain that can actually think from an Indian perspective, because methods can change, principles are eternal. And that is very, very important. That principles that Bharatiya Drishti Kona will provide are going to be the unique USP of our children when they go and basically will be working in the world. And then in terms of, when we talk about the undergraduate institutions, so in terms of the UGC, AICT, all these regulatory bodies, they should be thinking about introducing and making it mandatory for introducing IKS related course content. And this should not just be generic IKS course content, but this should also be discipline specific course electives that should be developed. For example, if I'm teaching civil engineering, a civil engineering undergraduate student should be able to take an elective in civil engineering related to IKS about temple construction, foundational engineering, or whether Sthapatya Kala or these kind of soil mechanics as related to different temple constructions, or fort construction, or construction of the ponds, water resource management. These are very valuable things even today. So they should be able to do these courses. And this should be made mandatory at the regulatory level. At the university level and at the college level, we should be developing courses to cater to these needs. And once this happens, the students will be taking the courses anyway up to 5 to 10% maybe in next 10 years. And beyond that, 15 to 20% in their engineering curriculum or any other BA, BSc, all those curriculums should be doing that. And then in terms of the government agencies, the funding agencies should be thinking about, and in terms of how do we measure the progress at this level, at the UG and PG level, we can look at number of courses that are being offered across the universities, and we can easily measure the content dedicated to the IKS as a percentage of the total credits. So let's say we have 180 credits, 10% of that should be related to IKS, at least to begin with. Maybe it should go up to 15% or 20% in next 10 to 20 years. So that's something that we should be thinking about. And then in terms of the research output, obviously we can measure it in terms of the papers that are coming out from this and number of research scholars doing this. But more importantly, to see the value of this research and the new knowledge that is being created for the society, we need to be looking at number of startups that are coming up that are based purely on IKS knowledge. Or even as Malaji is talking, developing, we need to be thinking about all the indices that we use to measure our different components, like whether we talk about health, emotional intelligence, or whether we are talking about any of the social parameters. Can we use a Bharatiya perspective for that? Number of metrics that are out there that are being used. And then I'll finish up in another 2 minutes. In terms of the government agencies, we should be looking at the percentage of funding that each of the agencies allocating to IKS related research. And what this again means is not talking about past glory. That is something that we do not want to do. We want to make sure that we are addressing emerging problems and contemporary problems and through the IKS and the contemporary knowledge systems. And we should be emphasizing on interdisciplinary research projects. And as a percentage of funding, maybe that can go up to 2% of the funding right now. I mean, that's not even there. Let's start with 2% in 5 years. And after 10 years, maybe we can go up to 5-10%. After that, it should become natural that every body is basically incorporating Indian knowledge systems into their thing and then using that to come up with products and technologies that will solve the current issues without any taking the modern knowledge systems and the Indian knowledge systems together, which could not be solved by either of them. That is the important part. So it should be, when we talk about new knowledge generation, it means that it would not have been solved solely by Indian knowledge systems nor the contemporary knowledge system. It is that blend that will give us that intellectual edge as we go into the next, as we are progressing in the next century. Because we want this next 25-30 years to be our Amrit Kal. This is what we need to do, because that is when we can provide confidence to our youth and we can provide them opportunities so that they can achieve their two purusharthas, dharma, artha and kama, while following their dharma without, and then being grounded in Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. I think these are essentially the kind of things I was thinking about in terms, again, just to reiterate in a few points. Stakeholders are going to be school children, undergraduate students, researchers and institutions and the general society in terms of what they need to do: develop course materials, integrate IKS into school curriculum, develop discipline-specific courses at UG level, PG level, support more research, interdisciplinary research specifically, teach all of these things in Matrabhasha, then give institutional support as we go forward and create resources so that all of this can be enabled, so that ultimately we can bring the Indian knowledge system from libraries to laboratories. Thank you so much. Namaste.